my people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Now, it's been highly requested, and I'm about to show you guys how you can replicate and recreate Michael, I think that's how you pronounce it, or it could be Mikel, I'm not sure, but the Girona set of tactics in the game FC24. Of course, I have gone ahead and created 3 various different lineups that they do try and use. Of course, it's total football that they're trying to implement throughout the entirety of the team. So sometimes you might find your left back playing as a central midfielder, other times you might find your centre back playing as a left back, your winger might be playing as a left back at times. It's very versatile, very free roll approach, and obviously with this various set of tactics you will be able to more or less implement that very fluid type football that obviously Girona try and implement. So of course right here we've got the 4-1-4-1 formation, and then I've gone ahead and created 2 other formations that more or less tries to get Gutierrez into the midfield a bit more. And more or less with this formation, the 3-1-3-3 formation, this is more or less what they try and set up with when they are attacking the opposition, as well as this one right here, which essentially is a 3-2-5, you could say. I know the game says it's like a 3-4-2-1 or something, but nonetheless, again, when they're trying to pepper the opposition, this is more or less the formation that they go with. So starting off with the 3-1-4-1 formation, of course, it's no real changes made to it. It's 1 goalkeeper, 2 centre backs, 2 fullbacks, 1 DM, 2 central midfielders, 2 wider midfielders, and then of course 1 striker. So for the Girona tactics going forward, with the various interchanging pieces and movements, and you will be throughout the course of the games, you know, changing your tactical approach and more or less the formations that you will be using, of course. So the tactical vision, I think, is custom because there's no real, you know, way that this team's style of play can fit into any of the various options that they give you. On the defensive side of things, the defensive style is set to press after possession loss. Now, they do look to try and keep the ball as best as possible. They have, like, I think on average so far this season, it's around 57%. So you are going to try and, you know, maintain the ball as best as possible. And we will get to the offensive side of things. But when they lose the ball, they implement a very strong counter-pressing system that looks to try and, you know, put a lot of stress and strain on the opposition's back line more times than not. And you will see this throughout the entirety of all the tactical setups that we will be going through. The team width is set to 30, as well as the depth is set to a mid-block, you could say, especially with the base tactics. And you will see as we get a bit more aggressive on the offensive side of things with the various tactics, the depth does tend to get a bit higher and higher as they look to try and, you know, pin the opposition back in their own half. The offensive build-up play is set to slow build-up as well as chance creation. Now, they do look to try and create those little triangle patterns of play in and around the opposition's half. But they do look to try and move the ball quite effectively through the thirds of the field, you could say, from defense to midfield to the attack. So you will look to try and keep the ball and maintain it as best as possible. Like I said, they are a possession-based team, so you are going to look to try and replicate that. The width is set to 25. Now, this does help keep them nice and compact. They do try and like almost implement a tiki-taka system where it's quick interchanging one-touch passes, pass and move, all these little triangles forming throughout the entirety of the field. So in order to try and get them as compact as possible, especially in the midfield area, I've gone with the 25 width. But of course, that doesn't stop the wider players, as in your left and your right midfielders, doesn't stop them from creating a bit of space down each flank. But we will get there with the instructions. Players in the box, though, I have set it to 6, and that's more or less your 3 attacking players, the likes of Savio, Kuto potentially, your striker Dovbek, and as well as I'm going to botch this man's name, but Tisgankov, I think that's how you pronounce it, Tisgankov. Yeah, so those 3 players will be the ones attacking, and if they're not, it will be one of your midfielders making that deeper run into the box. For corners and free kicks, as for always, I've set it to 4. So for the instructions going forward, we'll start off with the goalkeeper, as for always. With all the formations that we go through, he is going to have the same set of instructions. So being a sweeper keeper is essential, very modernized goalkeeper, and you will see as you push the line higher and higher, this is your back line, of course, you will be calling upon him a bit more to make those saves outside of the box, reclaim the ball in no man's land, circulate it back into play. Very good with the ball at his feet as well. And then, of course, come for crosses, be able to alleviate the stress on the back line when required. Moving on into the back line now. So Dali Blintz is set to a different set of instructions, but the likes of Lopez, he will be the sweeper of the 2 centre backs, so making sure that he is structurally sound with his defensive positioning at times. You could even allow him to have a bit more of a conservative approach for the interceptions, making sure that he's not always stepping out. You could go with that, but I've gone with the normal approach. But as for the likes of Dali Blind now, he is set to join the attack and step up, and this will more or less try and get him into those wider regions, almost playing as a centre back that can play as a left back when the likes of Gutierrez does get forward and invert. So you do want Daley Blind to try and fill that wider left channel when required. Moving on to the likes of your fullbacks now, Martinez has a very different role to Gutierrez. So Martinez is a bit more of a traditional fullback in this system right here. So for the attacking runs, he can definitely support the attack, but more times than not, he is going to try and, you know, maintain his position, have a bit more of a balanced approach, which is why we've got it set to balanced attack. And even so, you can have it to set to stay back while attacking, almost forming a back three system in certain moments. His interceptions, I've gone with a conservative approach because of the likes of Daley Blind stepping out at times. You want the likes of Lopez and Martinez to sometimes take up that centre-back pairing at times, like I say. It's a very much a makeshift approach, and I kind of like it so much. The way that the team plays and the way that they feel so fluid, it really does make you enjoy playing FC24. I'm not going to lie. I honestly think that this could be one of my go-to sets of tactics for my personal career modes and whatnot. But yes, anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So for the run type, it's set to mix, so he can sometimes invert into the midfield link up more effectively. Other times, if the likes of your right mid is cut inside a bit, he can look to create that overlapping run when required. And then, of course, his defensive positioning is set to stick to position. Onto the left back now, we've got the likes of Gutierrez, who is very attacking of the two fullbacks. So you will see with this left-hand channel, he does look to try and run it as best as possible. So he is set to join the attack as well as invert, getting him a bit more involved in the midfield build-up play. He does obviously sometimes provide that outside overlapping run of the winger, but more times than not, you see him making that underlapping run, trying to support either the midfield or potentially your left midfielder. And then as for his defensive positioning, I've set it to stick to position. Now moving on into your midfield, the likes of Garcia, not really seen as a DM, but effectively he has held down the position very, very well, being a very much a playmaker to the system. So he's set to cut past lanes and have a balanced approach for his attacking support, so not always looking to stay back, sometimes getting a bit higher up the field, being a bit more involved in the build-up play going forward. For his interceptions, I have it set to normal, and then as for his positioning freedom, it's set to being the deep-lying playmaker. So effectively, you do want him to try and drop into that back three at times. If the likes of Daley Blind does shift left, you want Garcia to drop in. But obviously, they've taken away, for some unknown reason, the ability to have your number 6 drop deeper and join up with the centre-backs. So effectively, being the deep-lying playmaker does get him more involved slightly deeper when required. So having the ability to collect the ball off of the centre-backs or even the goalkeeper, then turn his shoulder, drop it, and run into the midfield, he can definitely do that. And then for his defensive positioning, I've set him to cover the wing, so he does look to try and, you know, drift from side to side, looking to try and take up those slightly wider positions if required. And that does also get him a bit more involved in the defensive side of things. Slightly higher up the field now to our two number 8s, the likes of Herrera and Martin, or Martin, I think that's how you pronounce it. So basically, my understanding of the system is it's very asymmetrical. They try and shift a lot of their players to the right-hand side, linking up very effectively with Tizgankov, sorry, your right midfielder, as well as, you know, Martinez and so on. And what that effectively does is it tries to draw the opposition into that wider right-hand side of your midfield and your field, essentially. And that does open a lot of space for the likes of Savio as well as Gutierrez to try and work with down the right-hand channel. So with your number 8s in the system, I've tried to best replicate having them shift over to that right-hand channel. So we'll see here with Herrera, he's set to having a balanced approach for his attacking support, so very much a box-to-box role, being very involved with it. And that does also create a nice fluid approach. The support on cross is also set to balance, so sometimes getting into box, if your wider midfielders have not made that attacking run, sometimes your number 8s will fill in for them. Normal interceptions are set to be on for him, as well as cover the wing, and then for the positioning freedom on the offensive side of things, drift wide. And because he is on the right-hand channel, he will naturally look to drift into that wider right position, looking to link up very nicely with the players on the right-hand side. So moving on to the left-hand, you know, midfielder, also a box-to-box player, stay on the edge of the box this time, so not always looking to be as involved in the deeper side of things in terms of those runs into the box, but he can look to try and rotate the ball more effectively in and around the opposition's box. Normal interceptions are set to be on form, as well as cover the wing for the defensive positioning, and this does have a bit more of an effective approach, especially if Gutierrez is making that advanced run forward. And then for the positioning freedom, I've set him to free roam, and because the likes of your left back as well as Pereira will be drifting either into the midfield or into that wider right channel, it does force the likes of Martin slightly more right, and that more or less does get the best effective shift of the midfield that I can try and replicate in the game. Onto the left hand side now, the likes of Savio. Like I say, you are looking to try and get him into as much space down that left hand flank as possible. So his defensive support is set to basic, so sometimes can look to track back a bit more effectively. Other times, not so much, looking to hang up the field a bit more, be a bit more of the outlet ball if required. But his trans creation is set to stay wide. Now you do want to try and hug the touchlines, like I said earlier with the tactics. It is a very compact system, trying to get the midfielders nice and compact in the central areas. And then it does open up a lot more space for either your right or your left midfielder. And you do see that throughout the course of the gameplay. So you want him to stay wide. And for the support runs, he does have a lot of pace to burn, so you want him exploiting that space more times than not in behind the opposition's defense. For the interceptions, I've gone with normal, as well as the support on crosses, a balanced approach. So sometimes, yes, making that advanced run into the final third. Other times, looking to hang back, stay on the edge of the area, look to try and create, but potentially for his teammates, or potentially even whipping across the zone. As for the likes of your right midfielder, Tskankov, I'm probably butchering his name. I do apologize. But anyway, his support, his defensive support, I should say, is set to basic, just like your left midfielder. But this time, he will stay wide naturally. But the only real difference is the support runs. Not looking to get him behind as much, looking to sometimes be a bit more effective with it and come short, link up more effectively with the other midfielders, creating that nice box formation in the right-hand channel. Normal interceptions are set to be on form, as well as this time getting into the box. Those are the two major changes. You want your right midfielder looking to try and make those more advanced runs, because he does have a bit more support in this right-hand side. And then finally, moving on to Dovbyk, more of a target man striker that can make those runs in behind, so don't be afraid to send him on a run if required. But he is set to stay central and be a target man. Of course, the hold up play is essential for the system. Like I say, most possession-based systems, especially like the way football has evolved, you know, to this point, they do require a very strong physical number 9, and Dovbyk does provide that for his team. So the ability to back into the opposition, take some of the defenders out of the game at times, it is required. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on form, as well as having a basic defensive support. So again, he can look to make those runs in behind and stay nice and high up the field, or potentially having the ability to drop off and potentially even sucking the opposition centre-backs out of place, opening up a bit more space for the likes of your midfield or potentially your wingers to try and work into. Now, moving on to the 3-1-3-3 system. Like I say, it's a system that they like to try and work into eventually once the game settles down and they get a bit more of a grip on the game. They'll try and, you know, work this shape a bit more effectively. But again, it's a very fluid system, very fluid shape. So you will see a lot of interchanging pieces. Sometimes you will see Blintz taking up a bit more of an advanced midfield position, with the likes of Garcia dropping into the back line at times. So as for the formation, I've gone with a 3-4-3 diamond, and then I've just shaped it and shifted a lot of the players into these specific positions. So of course, it's 1 goalkeeper, 3 centre backs, 1 DM, and essentially it's supposed to be 3 central midfielders, but obviously with the movements in that central area, you can't really have a DM and then 3 central midfielders. So it's 2 central midfielders and 1 cam, but essentially he will be a central midfielder as well. And we will see that with the instructions, don't you worry. It's going to also be 1 striker and then of course 2 wider attacking players being wingers. So again, the only real changes for the tactics, of course, is still set to custom tactical vision, pressing after possession loss, width is still set to 30, but this time the depth, the defensive depth is set to slightly higher, more of a higher line being implemented now, being set to 75. And then as for the offense and everything in and around that, is still set to the same, as you can see right here. Okay, so for the instructions going forward with the goalkeeper Gazanega, like I said earlier, he's going to keep the same set of instructions as we progress forward. So still set to come for crosses and be a sweeper keeper. Now moving on into our back line, and this is where things start getting a bit more fluid, a bit more interchangeable. But Lopez, he's going to be the centre back of note, base set of instructions for him. Whereas the likes of Martinez, he's set to overlap, and you do want him getting a bit far forward, interchanging positions at times with the likes of Herrera and linking up more effectively with your right-hand channel. So getting him forward is essential. And that's the only real changes I can say for him. Whereas the likes of Dali Blintz, he is set to join the attack, and this more effectively gets him a bit more involved in the midfield. And like I say, you want to have that, you know, very fluid motion approach for especially the left-hand channel. Like I say, it's a very asymmetrical system that this team does try and take up more times than not. So having Dali Blintz get forward, link up more effectively with the midfield is essential. Moving on into the midfield, speaking of which, we'll start off with Garcia, set to cut passing lanes and drop between the defenders. So when the likes of Blintz does get forward, the likes of Garcia will drop slightly deeper. Normal interceptions are set to be on form, as well as being the deep lying playmaker, and this time looking to cover the center. So the likes of Lopez will shift ever so slightly, and the likes of Garcia will shift into that back line when required. Moving on to Gutierrez, I've set him to drop between the defenders. This does allow him to take up a center back or even a left back role when required. Of course, he is still a left back, and you still want him to have his defensive duties. And I think the effective drop between the defenders in this situation will get the best out of him on the offensive side of things, don't you worry, as well as the defensive presence that he will look to try and take up. The supports on crosses, I've gone with stay on the edge of the box. That'll allow him to be a bit more involved in the rotation of the ball, looking to try and work the ball into those opportune areas for your attackers. Normal interceptions are set to be on form, as well as cover the center for the defensive positioning, looking to try and clog and fill up as much of the central areas as possible. And then on the offensive side of things, the ability for him to drift wide, link up a bit more with Savio, it is required, so you do want him to have that opportune role for him. And then moving on to the right central midfielder now, Herrera and Gutierrez have very different roles. It's a more structured approach for the right-hand side, with a slight variance of fluidity to it. So for the attacking support, he is set to having a bit of a balanced attack, so it will implement a bit more of a box-to-box player for Herrera. Staying on the edge of the area, just like Gutierrez, looking to try and rotate and facilitate for the attackers going forward. Aggressive interceptions this time are set to be on for them, looking to just show a bit more bite on this right-hand side. And then for the defensive positioning, looking to try and cover the right-hand channel when required. He's set to cover the wing. And then the positioning freedom is set to free roam. Still, like I say, having a little tinge of fluidity in it, having the ability to interchange with Martin, or maybe even link up more effectively with your right midfielder or your right winger. Now moving on to your attacking midfielder slash your central midfielder, of course, with the set of instructions, it does allow him not to be as attacking as what an attacking midfielder would be. So for the defensive support, it's set to basic. You don't really need him doing too much. He can look to stay forward when required, or potentially drop a bit deeper and link up more effectively with the other three midfielders in and around him. Stay on the edge of the box to try and help facilitate with your other players. Free roam is required, having the interchangeability with Herrera, or potentially even linking up more effectively with the likes of Gutierrez. And then aggressive interceptions are set to be on form as well. So now moving on into the front line, the likes of Tiskankov playing as the right midfielder or the right winger. He's set to come back on defense and stay wide. Of course, it's a very naturally narrow system, so you need a bit more of a wing-back approach from your wingers, so they will look to track back when required. Of course, the likes of Martinez and Blintz can also fill those wider channels and pick up those runners if required. And of course, you do have a very hard-working midfield that can also look to try and support them on the defensive side of things. But again, you want them tracking back when required. Staying wide is essential, offering a lot of the width down either flank. Getting him behind though as well. So Tiskankov, of course, he's not known for his pace, but again, with this more attacking system, those runs in behind are required to try and, stretch the opposition. And more times than not, they look to try and take this shape as well as the next shape when the opposition play a low block and are being very hard to break down. So they look to try and alter and suck opposition players out. And more or less getting those runners in behind does do a very effective job. Normal interceptions though, they are set to be on form, as well as this time not always looking to get into the box, sometimes looking to stay on the edge of the area, just like with Savio, stay on the edge of the area and try and, whip in those crosses. And then moving on to our left winger, Savio, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Come back on defense, stay wide, getting in behind, as well as normal interceptions, and then balanced approach for the crossing runs. And then finally, moving on to Dovbyk, he's got the same role as well. Stay essentials, be a target man, aggressive interceptions, and then have a basic defensive support. Okay guys, we are almost finished with this video. Again, please, if you can, hit that like button down below, subscribe if you are new, that would be fantastic. Of course, the goal is 3K subscribers by the end of this year. We are currently, as of today, in December, so we have got 31 days effectively to try and reach that target. If you guys can and you are not subscribed just yet, please do me the biggest honor, the biggest favor, hit that subscribe button, please. Anyway, so with this formation here, They do try and implement it as well throughout the course of games, especially if the opposition is proving hard to break down, so they try and flood men forward. So effectively, it is a 3-2-5 formation, obviously trying to overload the opposition as best and as much as possible. For the formation though, of course, if you look in the top corner there, it says it's a 3-4-2-1, which I do not believe. It's effectively a 3-2-5. So it is 1 goalkeeper, 3 centre backs, 2 central midfielders, 2 wingers, 2 attacking midfielders, and then 1 striker. So again, there's no real changes to it except for the depth, this time looking to try and pile on more pressure and get a little bit higher up the field, looking to try and effectively pin the opposition in their own half with the depth set to 85. But other than that, everything else is set to the same. Effectively, you can even push this up slightly more, but again, you don't want to overcommit too many players in and around the attacking third because you can be counter-attacked on. You need to watch out for that, but more or less everything is the same. So starting off with the instructions, of course, Gazzaniga got the same set of instructions, come for crosses and be a sweeper keeper, with Lopez also having the same instructions. I'm sorry, I do sound like I am repeating myself, but it is essential for me to go through these things. Whereas the likes of Dali Blint having a slightly different role now. Before it was consistently joining the attack, linking up with the midfield, this time looking to overlap and try and support in those wider channels, just like Martinez will do. And they are both set to the same set of instructions, I should have mentioned that. So moving on into the midfield now, starting off with Garcia. Both him and Martin have very similar roles, you will see. But the likes of Garcia dropping between the defenders. So if the likes of Blint or the likes of Martinez overlap and they are slightly high up the field, he will look to try and take up a bit more of a central role, still keeping that back three system where it is effective. So I've set him to drop between the defenders when required. Staying on the edge of the area is also a must. Obviously, you are trying to overload the opposition, but sometimes the opposition have you on lock. Sometimes they have all the spaces filled. So what that effectively does is you will need and require your 2 central midfielders to stay on the edge of the area, slightly further out of the box, and potentially rotate the ball back into them, effectively allowing the opposition to get drawn back out into the wider or the more central areas of the pitch, and that in turn opens up a bit more space. So even though you are piling on pressure, these guys are required to not be as involved with that pressure pile on, and they can look to try and alleviate some of the pressure that the opposition's defense will have. Normal interceptions though are set to be on form. You don't want them being too aggressive and stepping out. Of course, with the system, you will be piling players forward, so you need to have a bit more structure, especially in your midfield, because again, you can be counter-attacked on with this team. Cover the wing is essential, of course, looking to try and fill in for the likes of your winger or potentially your right attacking midfielder if they do not track back. And then positioning freedom is set to free roam, still having a bit more of a fluid motion, having your central midfielders pop up in the little half spaces, potentially drawing opposition players out, occupying a bit more of the attacking space when required. Moving on to Martin, so a similar role to Garcia, but a slight variance and differentiation between the two. So he won't look to drop between the defenders. He'll have a bit more of a box-to-box role, being a bit more involved in the attacking play going forward, but again, still looking to stay on the edge of the area, not looking to break into the box and try and, take up, an attacking position. So looking to try and rotate the ball when required. Normal interceptions, though, are set to be on form, as well as the same set of instructions, free roam and cover the wing. Again, same answer as Garcia. You want to take up those wider areas if your attacking midfielder as well as your winger do not track back. And then free roam, you want him popping up in the little half spaces in and around the opposition's box. Moving on to our wingers now, the likes of Savio as well as Skankov have the same set of instructions. A slight symmetry to this formation, I will say that. Both are set to come back on defense, staying wide and getting in behind. Very much required. Of course, looking to try and exploit the opposition with those runs in behind. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on for them. And because you are looking to try and pile on as much pressure, if you do turn the ball over, you want your front five effectively trying to close down the opposition and win the ball back very, very quickly. And then as for the support on crosses, it's set to balance just like before. Okay, so now moving on into our attacking midfield roles, the likes of Gutierrez, don't forget he is a left back, but you want him in this attacking position going forward. So he's set to come back on defense. Of course, he is a left back, you want him dropping a bit deeper when required. The support on crosses is also set to balance, sometimes looking to interchange with Savio, allowing him to be the attacking player in the box, other times Savio allowing Gutierrez. And it does create a nice dynamic approach, I will say this. And it also makes it very hard for the opposition to try and know who to mark, who's breaking into the box, because they do alternate from time to time. The positioning freedom to create that nice fluid motion with your 2 central midfielders, it is set to free roam as well. And then the interceptions is also set to aggressive. As you can see here for Herrera, he's got a similar role, but slightly differing as well. Of course, he is more of the attacking central midfielder of the two. So he is set to come back on defense just like Gutierrez, but this time having a bit more of a I can break into the box role if required. Free roam is still set to be on for him, as well as aggressive interceptions. And then finally, the final set of instructions. Please hit that like button down below. I have been talking a lot. Dovbyk set to stay central target man, and of course aggressive interceptions. And then this time, the major change for it is he's set to stay forward. So if the ball is fired high and wide from the goalkeeper, he is there to collect it, start those counter-attacking breaks, or potentially just have the ability to occupy the opposition's back line. So yes, people, that is my version of Girona's tactics and instructions in the game FC24. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's very out there. I'm trying to replicate an asymmetrical system for probably the first time in the game FC24. Trying to create these various, very different roles for certain players. So again, if you have enjoyed it, hit that like button down below. If you're not subscribed yet, of course, the goal is 3K subscribers by the end of the year. Of course, we are on the 1st of December as of recording this today. We have got 1 month to go to collect around 250 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, hit that big red button. And of course, until the next time, I hope you have a damn great day. I'm out.